Caroline Dowd-Higgins. Thank you for listening to Your Working Life, my podcast series featuring thought leaders in the career and personal growth arena. You spend a significant portion of your life at work, so my goal is to provide you with tools, inspiration, and resources so you can enjoy your career and love your life. And I am delighted to welcome my very special guest to the show today, Kayt Sukel. Kayt, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Oh, I'm really excited to dive into a juicy conversation about your new book, The Art of Risk, the new science of courage, caution, and chance. But Kayt, I want to tell the audience a little bit about you because your background is really fascinating. You earned your Bachelor of Science in Cognitive Psychology from Carnegie Mellon University and your MS in Engineering Psychology from the Georgia Institute of Technology. You're a passionate traveler and science writer, and your work has appeared in Atlantic Monthly, New Scientist, USA Today, The Washington Post, Islands, Parenting, Bark, American Baby, and AARP Bulletin. So you are out there doing incredible work. So Kayt, tell me what inspired you to write this book, The Art of Risk, and how did you begin delving into this new science of courage, caution, and chance?
Sure. Well, you always hear the story that people hit midlife and they start going through a crisis, so they start taking more risks, right? They get the sports car, the girlfriend, they start some kind of weird hobby. But that wasn't my experience. I'd always been called a risk taker in life. Fearless was kind of an adjective that was used a lot to describe me, and I'd had a rather unconventional path. And yet I found myself at 40 in this midlife crisis in reverse. All of a sudden, I got myself a nice, reliable station wagon. I joined the PTO. I was only taking on really safe work, really boring work. And, I wasn't really doing much. And so it really made me wonder if risk had been this part of my success, such that it was before, where had my mojo gone? And how could I get it back? It's funny, more and more as I talk to people, I guess my experience isn't all that different, but we really do have this idea that people start taking more risks at 40, and yet, it seems like a lot more of us are actually hiding in our closets and, watching Modern Family reruns instead.
So let me ask, are there gender differences with risk-taking? For example, are men better risk-takers than women, or the opposite? What's the scoop there?
Better is a very loaded term. Historically, we've always thought of men as being the risk takers, and of course, women being better angels. And there's certainly an evolutionary biology argument to be made, right? So the idea that women have to protect the children, they have a run on eggs, so that they have to stay close to home and stay safe, while men have to go flit like the proverbial Siamese honeybee and, go propagate the species. However, what we see a lot of is men are good at bad risk taking. If you want to end up in jail, if you want to end up addicted to a substance, you want to get into a violent fight, Y chromosome is the way to go. But what scientists are learning now is that as opportunities to take risks have opened up, and certainly over the past 100 years, women haven't even had the right to vote for 100 years yet.
Right.
We've opened up hospitals, boardrooms, and even extreme sports to women. And when they get the opportunity to start, working in those arenas, they do quite well. Some measures of risk-taking would say that women are better at certain kinds of risks. They're better at social risks. They're more likely to take up for a coworker at work, to bring up an unpopular issue with their boss, to deal more of the uncomfortable sort of friendship and family risk-taking, whereas men are more into physical risk-taking. But again, I think as those opportunities open up and women can skydive or lead companies or, even play at the final tables of the World Series of Poker, we see women are doing just as well as the guys.
So this is just my anecdotal observation, but as a career coach working with a lot of leaders in the corporate and nonprofit arena, I see women taking risks on behalf of others, as you mentioned, advocating for
Yes.
others. They step up to the plate as that proverbial nurturer, mama bear, protect the people on your team, but they don't always self advocate for themselves in that risky scenario where, again, anecdotally in my observation, men are more willing to talk about themselves or go out on that limb for their own career advancement. Any research behind that or just concept behind that?
No, there is evidence to suggest that women are much more likely to say approach their boss to ask for a raise for a coworker than for themselves.
Wow.
And when you break it down, that's kind of curious. I mean, because it takes some chutzpah to do both, right? But why are they willing to go out on a limb for that coworker, not for themselves? Unfortunately, it's really hard to tease apart. People would like to say, "Oh, that's just the way women are. That's how women decide. That's how women do it." But we can't underestimate the power of societally
Right.
transmitted information. Women are told we're supposed to be nurturing, we're supposed to be selfless, we are supposed to think for the group. And while, again, we can go back and make all these evolutionary arguments that we do so because women are the linchpin of families and groups, we keep people together, etc. I wonder if we're going to still see the same thing as we see women advance in business, over, say, the next 50 years. I think that my gut feeling, and there isn't research to back this up, but just seeing how some of the changes and trends, how things have changed over, say, the last 10, 20 years, I think we'll see women who are more willing to take up for themselves and ask for themselves in the future.
So, are you seeing through your research and experiences that this is playing out in the career world with employers or even investors when it comes to gender and risk?
I do. I think that we really have a lot of biases, and they're based in outdated research. And this research was, sort of based on the idea that women were supposed to stay home.
Mm.
They were supposed to raise kids. They didn't have any business, in a hospital or a boardroom, or let alone jumping out of airplanes or, drag racing. So I think as we're getting more opportunities, we're getting more familiar, as our daughters are learning that, hey, it's okay to stand up for yourself. It's okay to try new things, to travel by yourself, to do, we're going to see women who are taking more and more risks. I also think that, based on our experiences, we sometimes have a very different view of potential opportunities,
Yeah.
things that men might miss just because they are so far out ahead a lot of times. And again, I don't think that's a nature difference. I think that's experience, and that's sort of a societal difference. And so I think investors should be paying attention. We see lots of research that show that teams that have women on them make better decisions. They do better in the long run. They're better at assessing risk, less prone to groupthink. And I think that's important. And that means having different perspectives can really help you better vet situations, whether they be investments, potential business deals, or just finishing a project on time.
So, Kate, I'd love to tap your wisdom about the entrepreneurial world. This is the age of the startup and the entrepreneur, and we're talking a lot about the gig economy and how people are enhancing their income with freelance and contract work. So, very
Mm-hmm.
entrepreneurial minded. What's the relationship between entrepreneurs and risk? And does the entrepreneur ever get to that point where they think, I'm good, I don't need to take that risk?
I think it depends a lot on the entrepreneur,
Yeah.
because I see two sides of this. So, not to step back into the gender thing, but so many people I know who started working in the gig economy are women.
Yeah.
And that's because they had to find a way to find a career that would let them stay home part of the day with their kids, or, they had to be really creative about the kind of businesses and the kind of work that they were doing so that they could, raise their families, or, go off and do things. So I find it really interesting that most of the successful freelancers I know, whether it's in the writing world or otherwise, are all women. We saw an opportunity, we saw a need and niche, and we filled it. And I think that's great. Now, some people like the entrepreneurial stuff because they like the rush. And
Yeah.
certainly some of us require more stimulation in life. And we get it from, extreme sports. We get it from, going out and partying. If we don't have other avenues, we might get it by going home and picking a fight with our spouse at the end of the evening. But we just need a certain amount of stress. We need a certain amount of, intensity to
Right.
keep
The
going.
adrenaline
And I
rush.
think
Yeah.
for some people, when you're talking about the entrepreneurial world, so many of these startups, you know the odds, most fizzle out within a year. There's something about the excitement of that uncertainty about getting things off the ground that really appeals to them. So I see some folks that put everything into one idea and want to see it push through, and other people that just jump from startup to startup. And I think your mileage really does vary based on how much stimulation you like, how emotionally invested you are in a particular company or endeavor, and what you're really looking to get out of it. Is it money? Is it a job well done? Is it the rush? And that is going to vary from person to person.
So, is there a correlation between courage and risk?
That is really interesting question. Of course, we all think there is, right? We look at people like firefighters, soldiers, heroes. They're willing to rush into burning buildings and risk it all to save people. They have what seems like just immense capacities for courage. And yet, what they also have is a ton of training.
Mm.
And we train them at the very edge of their abilities. So, people like cops and firemen, they're trained from day one to deal with dangerous situations. And what's interesting about the brain and sort of how we deal with uncertainty is that we want to fill in blanks. We want to try to minimize the risk as much as possible. And a lot of times, how the brain handles that is by going on autopilot, relying on sort of habits and automatic processing, so it can make sure that it's dealing with the most important variables at hand. When you have that kind of training, when you have that kind of background, you're not thinking about, oh my God, what's going to happen to me if I run in there, or what if I get shot? You're only thinking about the objective, and you have the training, so those automatic processes are really smart. They're really in tune. They're well synced up with the situation. And so what looks like courage a lot of times is really sort of automatic.
It's preparedness. Yeah,
It
that's
really
fascinating.
is. It's doing your homework. And
Wow.
of course, people don't want to hear that. They want to hear that, risk takers
It's much
are
sexier,
born.
right?
Yeah. Well, and in fact, I fell into that same camp. When I started writing this book, and I interviewed a wide range of different successful risk takers, a firefighter, an Army Special Forces operator, a serial entrepreneur, a renowned base jumper and free solo climber. And, at first I really thought I was going to be writing a book about superheroes and what made them different. And what I found is they're not all that different from us. They just happen to be very well trained and very well experienced in their area of expertise. And that's, I think, really inspiring, because that means that risk taking isn't a trait. It's
Yeah.
not something of those other people that doesn't touch me at all. That means it's a cognitive process, a decision making process that each and every one of us can harness and use to our advantage.
Well, that's a perfect segue, because my next question is this a natural inclination or a contextual one? And let me set you up. I'm thinking, is it that passionate person that's just willing to try something new? What about the planful, calculated person who has a very particular process? They can still take a
Mm-hmm.
risk, correct?
Correct. Well, in fact, going back to that negative risk taking, you want to end up in jail, you want to end up in
Right.
trouble. That's the impulsive
Yeah.
fly by the seat of your pants kind of risk taking. It might work for you once or twice. You may find that, putting that $500 on black 30 at the roulette wheel pays out for you once. But, it's not going to pay out for you over time. And that was the other astounding thing for me about so many of these risk takers. They're big nerds. They are planners. They are
Yeah.
so prepared, and they work so hard. Steph Davis, who's a base jumper, free solo climber, in fact, Cliff Bar, took away her sponsorship about a year ago. She was the only woman. They said that her work was too risky and it wasn't in line with their company values.
Wow. Wow.
And when I talked to her about some of this, she's one of these people who said, well, I don't really think of myself as a risk taker. She made the comment that so often other people only see the outcome. They don't see all the hard work that went into a particular decision or a particular behavior. And so when we look at some of these extreme sports folks, when we look at successful business people, we read about the deal, but we don't see all the hard work and all the time and effort that went into getting to that point. And I think that's really important because the successful risk taker, the seasoned risk taker, whether it's in business or in life, they do their homework. They know the ins and outs. They manage to reduce the uncertainty to a really manageable state so that they can move forward with confidence.
Well, it's fascinating. It's like the appearance of overnight success that really took a decade, right? But all you see is the end result.
Right. And, I think that's another interesting point. So often we talk about risk in extremes, especially when we're talking about business, right? It's the thing that is supposed to be avoided at all costs. And, people, especially employees, are not supposed to take risks. That's bad for the business. And yet, on the other hand, who are all of our heroes in the business world? They're the people who made, what often look like gambles, but were actually seasoned risks that paid off. And so, I think that's important to look at all the work that goes into something like that. It's not like Steve Jobs woke up one day and said, "Hey, I want to create the iPhone."
Right.
I mean,
Right.
there were how many iterations and how many designers who
Yeah.
quit their jobs at Apple because he had this very singular vision in mind. And it worked, but it was a lot of hard work, a lot of preparation, a lot of homework. And, we see the iPhone and we think, oh, wow, he came up with something so visionary, but we don't see how many decades of work that went into getting him to that point.
So, Kate, I'd like to wrap it up asking your take on failure. Especially in the entrepreneurial realm, there's a mindset of fail forward, fast, and often. In
Right.
Silicon Valley, if the startup isn't at least in the 2.0 iteration, they don't have street credibility. So, what is the connection between risk, failure, and perhaps recovery is the most important part of that formula?
Right. No, I think you're right. Innovation is all about failing forward. And I think that's another thing that successful risk takers do. They learn from their mistakes, they don't take them personally. They manage to sort of distance themselves and have the ability to put those mistakes in context so they can do better next time. They're also really highly motivated. And I know it sounds weird to say they're highly motivated by mistakes. But another thing that one of the risk takers told me is, I haven't failed. I just haven't finished yet.
Ooh, I like that.
And yeah, I want to stitch it on a throw pillow and throw it on the couch because how much could each of us accomplish if only we told ourselves, I haven't failed. I just haven't finished yet. Now, does that mean that we keep, throwing money, sunk cost after sunk cost into a business idea that's not going to work out? Maybe not. But what it does mean is that we learn from our mistakes that we can figure out how to apply them to the next situation, maybe to the next startup, to the next opportunity, and do better that time around. Failure is always going to be part of an innovation. It's always going to be part of business, but it's how you use those failures to propel yourself forward that really makes the difference.
Oh, Kate, that's a great place to end. I haven't failed. I just haven't finished yet. Brilliant. What a great conversation. I so enjoyed having you on the show. And your book is The Art of Risk, The New Science of Courage, Caution, and Chance by Kayt Sukel. Kate, tell us how we buy the book and connect with you online. You've got an amazing website.
Sure. So you can buy the book wherever books are sold, but I should probably mention that Amazon listed it as a best book in business and leadership.
Yeah.
So you can definitely get it there. You can learn more about the book and my other work at kaytsukel.com, KaytSukel.com. And I also kind of chronically overshare on Twitter at Kayt Sukel. So KaytSukel. I'd love if you say hi.
Excellent. Kate, really, I so enjoyed you today. Thank you very much. Your book is amazing, and I learned a lot. So I wish you continued success, and I hope our paths cross in person sometime soon.
Me too. It was a pleasure.
And I want to thank all of you for tuning in to Your Working Life, where my goal is to help you design your career destiny so it doesn't happen by default. Career and life satisfaction is possible, and it's time to embrace what you love doing so you can do more of it. My show is now available on iTunes, YouTube, Podbean, and Stitcher. Leave a comment because I always appreciate hearing from my listeners. I'm Caroline Dowd-Higgins. Take good care.